bring in the NBA Commissioner, Adam Silver. Last time you were on, I thought we solved a lot of problems with the NBA. I still have some things that maybe we could solve, but we'll talk about those coming up. We had Jeff Van Gundy on yesterday. He said, let's do away with halftime, offensive goaltending, and maybe free throws. Do you want to respond to any of those things that Jeff Van Gundy, one of your voices of your sport?
I actually listened to that interview with Jeff, and I think even he acknowledged he was having fun. It's interesting on halftime when we've looked to shorten it a bit because we changed the format of the last 2 minutes a couple of years ago to speed the game along. And I think we forget sometimes that the guys really do need the break. I mean, put aside the programming at halftime, the commercials, but it maybe you could shorten it slightly, but I think it is meaningful to the players in addition to the coaching that goes on at halftime, the opportunity to get a breather. It's, by the way, I remember, Rod Thornwell, who used to work at the league office with me, telling me that when he was a player, that was an opportunity to have a smoke and a cup of coffee.
What do you think about offensive goaltending that we do away with? Once it's on the rim, it's European style.
Right, the FIBA rule. That's what we do in the Olympics and in the Basketball World Cup. I think it's an exciting play. We've looked at it. We've experimented with it. In fact, we have a competition committee meeting this afternoon, and it's come up over time. I think around some of the Olympics, there's been a more serious conversation about it, but for whatever reason, people haven't been talking about it a lot lately.
What about the All-Star game? You talked about this yesterday. Maybe the international stars against the American stars. Is that something that could happen as early as next year?
Not as early as next year. We're going to be in Indianapolis. One of the things we're looking at for next year is returning to the East versus West format, the more traditional format. I mean, we definitely need to do something. I mean, to spruce it up a bit. It's I think all the leagues have dealt with issues around All-Star. I know when I was a kid, when you turned into an All-Star game, it was an opportunity to see players you never otherwise saw, and literally to see them next to each other in their uniforms, because I grew up in New York. I was a big baseball fan. You just didn't see players that often, from other teams. I think now with League Pass, digital media, they're so familiar to players that there's just something lacking. And I think we need to find a way to create some real competition. And again, an idea that's come up in the past, doing, the Ryder Cup style, except not just US versus Europe, US versus the world. And one of the reasons we hadn't done that historically was there's an imbalance, because even as the number of international players grow, it's still far less than half. But I think, to me, as we look to make it more engaging for fans, that shouldn't be the sole reason we don't do it. I think we could add additional All-Stars. There's something we could do, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, because, again, we do need to do something to make it more interesting.
I was wondering about this. I brought it up with Jeff Van Gundy, where we see flopping. And what if it was called and the punishment was you got the letter F on your jersey? And it's like the scarlet letter, and the scarlet letter is F for flopping, like a Buckeye for Ohio State football.
Yeah, the issue, one of the serious things we're discussing is possibly adding a technical for flopping, which they do in international basketball. College added a flopping technical just this past season. Of course, the issue, one of the reasons we haven't done it historically, is because by definition, they're fooling the referees. And we had an after the game remedy, which was a fine. But frankly, if you're successful in fooling the referees, a relatively small fine isn't going to make a difference. You may even be celebrated for having done it. So I think we do need, putting aside the scarlet letter, I'm in favor of adding a technical, because even though it'll be a difficult call, there is replay on certain plays, so you might catch it after the fact. And I think there has to be a greater disincentive for doing it, and there has to be a competitive risk to flopping.
As the commissioner, how much influence do you have over your TV partners? You got the Joker, who now people are seeing. They're almost forced to see him because he's in the NBA Finals. But to market some of these players, Joker's a hard guy to market. He's not a highlight guy. But what influence can you have over the TV partners of Can we focus in on some of these other players that maybe, the rest of the country doesn't focus on?
You know how quickly you forget when you were at SportsCenter, calls from me when I was running NBA Entertainment to say, why aren't you running more highlights of fill in the blank? So we have some influence. It's interesting. I mean, the networks, I mean, they do focus on the teams and players that they think are going to be most popular. In fairness to them, the Joker hasn't been in the finals before. Of course, he's a two-time MVP. But we're seeing now, I think I read the other day, he went from the 18th most popular player on social media to the number one player on social media over the last 2 weeks. So fans are responding. The networks will respond. I mean, I've been at the first three finals games. I mean, it's an incredible, display of basketball. I know, you're a former player, a huge fan, and I think the country is warming up to it. I mean, the team style that they play, Miami too, for that matter. I mean, this is just from a basketball aficionado standpoint. I mean, this is really, basketball playing at its highest level. And I think, by the way, we're seeing it in the ratings. I think, going in, the projections were that we were going to be down almost 25% from Boston and San Francisco. And of course, that hasn't been the case. In fact, probably after last night, we're going to be up a little bit, which says a lot about the league that you have two mid-sized markets. Of course, a popular team in Miami, a Nuggets team that has never been in the finals, and the fans are responding by watching.
Yeah, they're two likable teams. We're talking to the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver. What was your reaction to the Live Tour, PGA Tour news?
I don't know enough about what really went on there on the inside. I guess I'm not so surprised, given that there was a ongoing lawsuit and investigation, and the fact that they were, I think, hurting the golfers at the end of the day. I mean, they were turning golfers against each other. Again, this is just me from a fan's perspective and a fan of the sport. I'd also say that golf, just like basketball, is extremely global. There's interest around the world. I think that, I was listening to some of the prior comments on your show, and I hear what people are saying about Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, and this is for, good and bad, that when the Saudis invest in sports, it gets outsized attention. Now, I don't want to complain about that because we want to get outsized attention. On the other hand, somebody could go down the list there. They are investors in some of our largest American corporations. Some of the most well-known brands have investments from them. And I also think it's a two-edged sword. I hear the comments about sport washing. On the other hand, you're talking about it, others are talking about it. It's not as if some errant golfer can say one thing about his reaction to Saudi Arabia investing in golf, and that's left at that. I think people are pretty sophisticated. And the same way the World Cup, the Football World Cup, Soccer World Cup brought enormous attention to Qatar. I think people learn about these countries, learn about what's happening in the world in ways they otherwise wouldn't. So I think the media does its job. But at the end of the day, I also think, and now talking specifically about the NBA, where we're such a global sport, I think people are a little too dismissive these days about the benefits that come from the commonality around sports, that with a sport like basketball, our finals are distributed virtually everywhere in the world. The sport is played everywhere in the world. It's an opportunity to bring people together. I mean, we're talking about, Jokic from, Serbia. We have over 25% of our players now were born outside of the United States. I just think that it's the media does its job.
But have the Saudis looked to invest or buy an NBA team?
No.
What would
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, they certainly haven't come to the league office. And under our rules, an individual can only buy an NBA team right now. You can a fund, and that's what's happening here.
Okay.
It's called a sovereign wealth fund that's investing in the PGA Tour. But we allow funds to invest in teams, but not control teams, not to have influence over teams. So to own an NBA team, there has to be an individual with a certain percent of the team to control it.
Is the Ja Morant investigation over? We're just waiting for the finals to be over to announce the decision?
The latter. We are waiting for the finals to be over. I'm aware, of course, of these reports on social media about, whether the gun was in fact a gun. And so we haven't completely wrapped it up.
Does that
Be
matter,
honest,
Commissioner, if that's a toy gun?
it's interesting. It's the very issue is for Ja, certainly in the first incident, was treating a gun as a toy. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And that's what I think the danger is to society, taking a gun, live streaming it, this is without getting into gun issues in terms of the propriety of owning guns and the use of guns. I think everyone agrees that gun safety is critically important and that guns aren't toys. So it's something that I'm thinking a lot about because, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the investigation, but in fact, if you are live streaming something that to the world looks exactly like a gun and in a frankly reckless manner, should it matter whether or not it's a real gun? I mean, I will say at the end of the day, in terms of doing my job, everything that's presented to us is relevant. Past conduct is relevant. The circumstances in which you're doing whatever the act is becomes relevant. And in this case, obviously we're going to take into account whatever's presented to us.
When we heard from you after what happened with Ja this second time around, it's almost like there was disappointment. Like you were let down by Ja Morant. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. And Joe Dumars, who now runs basketball operations to the league, and I talked a lot about it because we were both in the meeting with him. The head of the Players Association, Tamika Tremalio, was in the meeting with us. And just honestly, my sense was he was very sincere in how contrite he was, in how serious he was taking the issue. Again, now talking about the first incident where there's no fact in dispute. He was holding a gun, inebriated in a club, waving it, live streaming it. So that's the first go round. And I know Ja a bit. I had known him. He's a star in our league. And the sense was he came in, he fully owned it, was saying, I made a terrible mistake. Learned from the mistake. And so then to get the report and then to see online that in fact he was then live streaming a gun, certainly looks like a gun, a Glock, in a kind of reckless manner. Sure, I was incredibly disappointed.
What would be a big suspension?
I'm not going to get into precise number of games, but I will only say in response to people who say 8 wasn't enough the first time around, it felt like a pretty severe punishment at the time, and an 8-game suspension, of course, without pay. And so I will say, and I said this before, in terms of impacting his behavior, would 12 games have made a difference the first time, 15 games? I really don't know. I also, the older I get, I realize that I can't control other people and that he has to own his own conduct. And regardless of the number of games he had been suspended for first time around, he owns this, not me. And he has to take responsibility for it. And part of this, it's fine for somebody to come in and take responsibility for their action. And I'll even give him the benefit of the doubt that he was sincere. He's now made this mistake again. And I think one of the things we even talked about then is nobody's naive in the league office, certainly not Joe Dumars, been at this a long time, was, we'll see as you go back out into the world, how you choose to comport yourself. And so now here we are again, dealing with an issue around Ja. And I also think it's important to point out that this is not about just discipline and then we'll just cross our fingers and then hope there's not a third time. I recognize that he needs some assistance, from the league office, his union, his team. He's no doubt he's a remarkable player, and I think he's a very engaging young man. It's one of the reasons he has this enormous following on social media. But it's a two-edged sword, and he has to own that and take responsibility for it. And my hope is that wherever we come out in terms of discipline, that there's an acceptance that we need to find ways to engage with each other going forward so he can change the trajectory he's now on, which is not a positive one.
And I wondered about that, Commissioner, that I was worried about him over the summer. Now we've had this second incident. And also, if you suspend somebody for 20 or 30 or 40 games, what happens to that person when they have all that free time? And you could be adding to the issue with John Morant, not subtracting.
Precisely. And I'm worried about that too. And so, again, putting aside the number of games that we may be looking at, I'd like to come up with a program, and frankly, working with him, in which there is a joint sense, a mutual commitment that we need to put together a program, not something that's, a couple of sessions and I'm back, but something that where he will be able to use time away from the game. Look, he's suspended right now. I mean, he's away. It's the off season, but he's suspended from team activities, and there. I want to find a way where, frankly, he's not being kicked to the curb, but basketball will take a back seat. And first and foremost, we're going to focus on him as a young man developing as a better person, as someone who's more responsible, particularly when it comes to guns. I mean, this is a really serious issue.
All right, next time you're on, I got to address carrying. Okay, we have to address this, and maybe you could bring it up. Maybe just you and me. We just sit down and we discuss. Get everybody out. I don't need a committee. What do you think?
We did talk about this last time I was on.
I know.
It's an issue. It's I hear you. It's a hard call, and I hear it from fans when I'm in the stands. And next time, why don't I come on with Joe Dumars, our basketball expert, and let's talk about it? Because in all seriousness, we are the most played team sport in America, and so people can relate to it when they watch the game, and they whether it's carrying, palming, traveling, whatever it is, people have a sense. And one thing that frustrates me in terms of the rules, that, and as I said, I got a competition committee meeting this afternoon, that when it's explained to me by the officials and Monty McCutcheon, who oversees our officiating staff, it quickly becomes very technical. And I think we need to find a way with our rules that they can be presented in a simple way. And well, everything can't be so bright line, but there's a better sense, like, yes, that's traveling, or no, it's not. And that's something I think we should be able to do a better job with.
Did you just invite me to the committee? I mean, because it's a yes. If you want me involved in this, I'd be more than happy.
It's a yes.
All right, there you go. It's official. Is there a handshake or a jacket or blazer that I wear, an ID card, whatever I need to be on that committee? You let me know.
I will. By the way, when I was in Denver the other day, I think, traveling, jumping time zones and things, it was late at night. I was just flipping around the television and I watched Blended.
What'd you think?
I thought it was a pretty good movie. I know you've done a bunch of those Adam Sandler movies. I hadn't seen it before. It's a few years old, but I enjoyed it.
I'm an actor who does sports radio on the side, Commissioner.
But you didn't play yourself. I think in Hustle you played Dan Patrick.
Yes.
You didn't in Blended.
By the way,
I'm an aficionado of your films.
Thank you.
There was a distinction.
Thank you. And the fact that you call them films and not movies, I respect that as well. And you know who carries the ball more than anybody?
Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler. Absolutely, Commissioner. Absolutely. You know what? I'm going to get Sandler to do a PSA for the NBA on an anti-carrying program.
Thank you. It could have a double meaning, by the way.
Yeah, the John Morant anti-carrying. Absolutely. I got it, Commissioner. Hey, I know you got a busy day. Thank you for taking time.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Adam Silver, NBA Commissioner. That's a good appearance by the Commissioner.
Oh. He crushed that last one. It was on a tee. I didn't think he was going to go there.
I'm like,
that was great.
I'm gonna throw it out there.
Anti-carrying.
Anti-carrying.